Okay, well, it's about 4 o'clock according to my clock, so I want to go ahead and get started. So I just want to say thank you all for joining me today. So today is the first day of my 30-day art challenge that I'm doing for September, and the goal is to live stream it at least every weekday. And so I talked about it yesterday. If you missed that, you can go back and watch that recorded video here on my Facebook page. So anyway, hopefully you're ready to kind of get started. I don't know if I'm going to use the entire hour. So the idea is that I've set aside an hour between 4 and 5 p.m. to sit down and make some art. So I'll probably do a little intro each day, and of course, as I'm working, I'll probably talk and mention what I'm doing and maybe give some tips. But for this art making challenge, there really is no challenge. There's no theme or idea. So it's just kind of, if you want to make art with me, awesome. If you just kind of want to see what I'm doing, that's awesome too. So really appreciate you all being here. And today is kind of a frustrating day. Very first day, I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down and do this. But then I get home and I'm having water heater trouble. I come home and my wife is like, oh, we don't have any water or hot water. So I go downstairs in our basement and I get caught up. We have a leak. We have some issues that I have to take care of. And then I look at my clock and I was like, oh, it's 3:30. I'm live streaming at 4. I need to go get ready for that. And so then came up to my makeshift studio here at the house, and then was having internet issues. So hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear for you right now. But that's kind of, my head is probably not in the art making space that it should be. But maybe that's a good thing. So now I can spend the next hour or so and get into that space. So anyway, thank you for joining me, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my overhead view. You can actually see, this is my camera. I've lowered it so that you got a little bit closer view of my workspace, especially since I'm working really small. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that view, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So today I'm going to be working with my 4" by 4" mixed media paper. I've got some watercolor. I've got some watercolor pencils. I've got some other things around the studio that I can use. So traditionally, well, not traditionally, but I often start with using watercolor and kind of layer up some different watercolor techniques just to kind of get started. I have no idea what I'm going to, excuse me, what I'm going to do today. So I'm just going to take some paint, and I'm just going to scrub down some paint. I'm not going to be too worried about it being neat and perfect and pristine. Actually, I kind of like it when it's a little bit scratchy and uneven. So anyway, so that's the first layer, that quick, just a couple seconds. That's all it took. I do have a hair dryer, so I am going to dry it. I'm not going to mute it. In the past, I've muted, but the problem is that I forget to turn the microphone back on. So hopefully it won't. If you've got your volume turned up really high, you might want to turn it down a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and blow dry it, and then I'll go ahead and do a second layer. Or maybe I won't, because it's not plugged in. So that's how my day's going. Sorry, all that banging around is just me trying to get it plugged in. Alright, now let's try that again. Sorry for all the issues already. There we go. So if you have any comments or any questions that come up, feel free to type them into the comments there. And every once in a while, I'll look up and try to answer or address anything that's coming up. So yeah, so I've got one layer of blue. I think I'm going to use that exact same blue. And I'm going to do a splatter. I love splattering. So when I splatter, I just hold it kind of almost perpendicular, but I pull the bristles back, and you can probably hear my dogs barking in the background because who knows what's going on downstairs with them. But anyway, so a little bit of splattering and more drying. So I have a couple spots on there that are kind of big wet spots, and so they'll take a long time to dry. But what I'll do is I'll take my brush and just sort of drag it. My brush is wet, so I am kind of wetting the paper again, but this will kind of create some streaks. And then I can dry it. Okay, so I think I'm feeling a little bit of purple, so I just kind of grab blue randomly, but I'll go ahead and put a little bit of purple in there. Oh, it's a little dark. Get a little bit of water and kind of dilute that purple a little bit. I have noticed that this camera doesn't pick up purple really well, so trust me, it is purple. It might look kind of like a dark blue. Now I'm using the Core, the QOR travel pan set, and I really like it. It's very bright, very vivid, but it's not permanent. The Derwent tends to not lift up too much after it dries. The Core will if I really scrub. So I'm trying to be careful not to scrub the watercolor, the blue underneath it. I don't want that to fade too much. So there's a third layer already, and we're just 10 minutes into the stream. Okay, so I've got a pretty nice little watercolor background there. I'm going to switch up materials because I do want this to be mixed media. So I'm going to turn to some sort of nondescript fodder, some collage materials. And you can't see it, but I've got a pile kind of over off the camera. I mentioned this yesterday in my introduction video, but I love security envelopes. I love the fact that there's a pattern inside. Some companies now have like their actual logo as the pattern inside, but I like these ones that have just sort of a more generic pattern. And I think what I want to do is just rip some of this up. I like the randomness of ripping, and so just go ahead and rip some of these up. Okay. I think 3 or 4 pieces might be good. I do want to trim these. I want them to be a little bit even, so I'm going to trim off this white part here. And it's going to go over there. Probably that's going to go there. I think I'm going to glue those down first before I figure out where I want to put the other piece. When I glue, I like to use some scrap paper. So I've got this old pad of paper and got my glue stick handy. And I can just turn the piece over on top of that scrap paper. I do use the glue stick. It is blue. It's starting to dry out, so it's kind of a lighter blue than normal. But this glue stick, it really does dry totally clear. It's my favorite glue stick. So if you've tuned in before for live streams or for any of my classes, you know that I'm a big fan of the Uhu glue sticks. Unfortunately, you can't find them too often in brick and mortar stores. At one point, you used to be able to go into Michael's or Staples and you could find them everywhere. But nowadays, it seems like you got to order them online, or I know the Blick arts material stores, the physical stores actually have them in stock. So some art stores do, but yeah, they're not quite as ubiquitous as they once were. So I just order mine online, usually through Blick, and I'll get 12 of them at a time. I think I'm gonna cut this one. And so, yeah, I think that's looking good. One of the nice things about working underneath a camera is that I can kind of look up at my view on the computer screen and sort of get a better sense of the composition. And that's another reason why I'm kind of working small, is that sometimes when we work really big, it's really hard to get a sense of the composition unless we step back away from it. And so in this case, even though it's 4 inches by 4 inches, kind of looking up at my computer monitor kind of helps me really see what the composition's looking like. I think I want to have another one up there. And like I've said, this whole kind of challenge thing wasn't about me putting out like a different theme or idea every day. Like I know there are some challenges out there. I kind of think of Inktober coming up next month, where they usually have a different prompt each day, and then people kind of create based on that prompt. But for me, this was just sort of like, let me sit down and make art for 30 days just to kind of see what I can do. And, trying to spend at least an hour a day and, working small. Before I started, I was like, oh, am I going to like work on this for like 20 minutes and then be done? But I'm pretty meticulous and I do lots of layers. So this size is actually really good for me as far as kind of an hour's worth of time. And oftentimes I would have like 10 of these, but I'm really trying to focus on just making one at a time, to really kind of devote time to one of these to see where it kind of goes. Now that glue in there is mostly dry, but what I find is that if I paint over top of it right after I glue it down, it has a tendency to want to peel off. So if I'm trying to work like I am today on one thing and trying to speed things up, I'm going to speed it up. I'm going to go ahead and dry it. It might seem kind of weird, but there is some water in that glue stick. I want it to be really dry so it stays stuck, because I'm going to build up on top of that with watercolor or with the Inktense pencils. So go ahead and hit it with the hair dryer, and hopefully that will keep it really stuck. Alright, so I'll probably come back to some collage in a little bit, but let me kind of get some of this stuff out of the way. And I think what I want to do now is grab my Inktense Pencils. Again, if you've ever tuned in to anything I've done, then you know that I'm a big fan of the Derwent Inktense Pencils. And I keep them in this little pouch. I bought a big set a long time ago, and I really like how, you know, the 72 colors, but it can be kind of a bit much. So I've picked out my favorite ones and put them in here. You can get different sets. They have like a 12 and a 24, but what I find is that there's always some that I use a lot, and then some I barely use. And the nice thing is that if you do use one up, you can always buy a single pencil. And so I did that with the violet here. So I'm going to use this and create some structure. So I like how the torn pieces really give it a little bit of variety. I think I like that. So, but I want to give it a little bit more structure. And I'm not a big fan of squares and rectangles, but I use them a lot, and that creates a lot of structure, a lot of predictability. And I end up doing it a lot. And like I said, even though I'm not really a big fan of them, of squares and rectangles, I think it's just more of that structure. We can kind of think about that basic grid of squares, and so having some squares, straight lines, some rectangles kind of echoes that notion of a grid, makes it a little bit more predictable. And so that's why, again, I'm kind of putting two squares one above each other, create some structure. Maybe I'm thinking maybe a line that goes down like that. There. So what I do, and if you've tuned in before, you've seen this technique. It's one of my favorites. I do the outline and then I shade into the background, and I'm pressing a little bit harder near the edge, lightening up my pressure as I go away, kind of shade it, and then goodness, didn't have a chance to make any tea today to have while I worked. So anyway, taking my little brush, and I can go right in to the edge, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll kind of start out here with clean water, and then as I go in, I pick up more of that Inktense and kind of work it back out. If I have too much purple, I can rinse off a little bit, spread it out. Or like I said, I can start just right on there and kind of work it out. Either technique kind of seems to work, and I kind of mix it up as I go. But this is probably one of my favorite techniques, and I think what it is, it kind of creates this window effect. So the darker value near the square, near the shape, kind of creates a shadow, makes it sort of pop out. However, the inside of the square stays untouched and kind of shows a window of what's underneath. So it adds a layer, but then it has these areas that you can kind of see through. And I like that because you probably can't tell from the video, especially I have my camera kind of raised up, but I can still see some of the spots and the collage and the things that are underneath the purple. And so I could see that, like, oh, okay, what's in that square is a continuation of what's in the background, but now the background has this purple layer on top of it. And as I was saying, this is something that I do to create structure, to create some predictability in the composition. You can notice how, like, with this line, it really takes it to the edge, and I paint off the edge. I glued my collage up to the edge. So I really want to think about the edge of the work of art. Too often I feel like sometimes artists, especially young or inexperienced artists, tend to like put everything kind of in the middle, and the work of art becomes this kind of picture frame for the work. So yeah, so I'm really trying to incorporate the whole piece, and that little bit just really pushed the collage into the work of art. It's not just kind of floating on there, and that's one of the reasons why I added the collage when I did. Okay, so hit it with the hair dryer, and it'll change a little bit because that security envelope is wet, so it's kind of dark. It'll lighten up a little bit. One of the interesting things at this stage of the work is that there really is no orientation yet. I mean, I've been kind of working on it with this orientation, but as I work on it, maybe I want to flip it. Probably won't go this way, but I might turn it this way. It kind of depends on what else I decide to add to it. Probably won't go that way. That starts to look too much like a face. So I'm thinking like that or like that. But again, it kind of I have to think about what will come a little bit later. Okay, so I'm kind of at this point where it's like I'm still adding, still kind of thinking about this as more of a background. So I'm kind of adding color, adding texture, adding shapes. And so I'm going to pull out, I got a little box of stencils here. And I think I'm going to pull out my plastic mesh. So this is plastic canvas. I typically use it with the paint and it becomes a nice stencil. But I think today what I want to do, I'm going to go for a totally different color. I'm going to use my red Faber Castell Pit pen. And the nice thing is it has a really small, fine point on it. And so I can use it and trace some of these little shapes. So I'll end up, and I like the circle part. That's going to bring a little bit of contrast. Going to just be it's going to be a variation to the squares and straight lines. So the torn collage adds a little bit of contrast, but then the circle and the red's going to bring even more contrast. But the nice thing is that red is related to purple, so it's not going to feel completely out of place. Now I'm not going to trace every single little hole, even though there are some people who just might. That's just a little bit too tedious and time consuming. But if I kind of do some random ones, it's going to give me a pattern that I can tell, like, oh yeah, it's in a circle. But it's not going to be overpowering. It'll kind of work nicely into the background, and actually some of these little shapes won't show up too well because of what's already in the background, and others will. So as we're working, like I said, if you've got any comments or any questions, and what I'm hoping is that you're sitting there kind of doing your own thing, you're kind of busy with that, but one of the reasons of doing these live streams is so that people can ask questions or comment. So every once in a while I'll kind of look up at the comments to see, but yeah, nothing right now. And even if I miss comments, I always try to go back and respond and answer later after the live stream is done. So even if I don't have a chance to answer your question now live, I can always go back and answer it later. So it might be a little hard to see. Let me hold this up so you can see all those little red spots. And I just like the fact that they look like little tiny rectangles, but then they're oriented. It's kind of hard to tell that it's in a circle, but maybe you can kind of get that feeling with it. So just a little note about how I work. This is how I typically work. I just start something and I don't have a real strong idea of what I'm doing or what it's going to mean or what it's going to be. So at this point, I'm not totally sure. However, I did have a thought. So when I was talking about the orientation before I did the little red marks, I have these black and white images of myself that I have. So I just did a selfie and then put it in to my photo app on my computer and just kind of bumped up the contrast, made it black and white. So I've got a big one, which I think is too big, but I'm kind of thinking maybe the smaller one. And so that's so as I was working, I was like, oh, I have these photos. What would that look like? So I think at some point I'm gonna pop that on, but what I'm really thinking about doing is cutting out around my head so it's not just like a big rectangle, because that's pretty big compared to the work surface, the size of that. So I think I'm gonna trim this down. And I could do this with an X-Acto knife and a cutting mat, but I think I can just do it with my scissors. Just kind of go around sort of the silhouette of the image. Sorry if my talking kind of trails off. As a lot of you probably know, sometimes for artists it's hard for us to talk and work at the same time. Because what happens is, I think, we tend to focus on our making, and then if we're talking, it kind of trails off. After 24 years, 25 years of teaching, I can kind of talk and work at the same time, but I do find that sometimes I'll either just stop in the middle of a sentence or I will trail off. But so just kind of want to warn you if I do stop in the middle of a sentence or trail off there. Okay, so I like that. And the nice thing about cutting collage this way is that it will tie into the piece a lot easier because it becomes part of the image so much easier. So it really, the work of art becomes the background. So this is why I was thinking like the orientation. So even though I've been working on it this way, and then turn it that way. So I'm thinking I like this. Oh, a little shiny. I think I like it this orientation just because of the two squares, and it kind of helps create sort of a triangle. I do have a comment from Bobby I just saw asking about if I use a template for circles especially. I do both. I often freehand, but I do have little templates. Actually, I'll show you. They're in what I do with my box. That's the problem. Is like I move stuff and I don't know where I put it. See, I'm kind of working unconsciously. I'm like, I had the box. What did I do with it? Oh, sorry, I put my collage stuff on it. All right, so I was showing you my box of stencils. I do have this set of templates that I really like. Um, they're actually made more for little kids, and I think I ordered them from Blick, but I could be wrong. I've had them for a while, um, but I like them because there's just a few circles on this one, and these are all like good sizes, and they're inexpensive. It was a set. There's a circle, there's a square one. The nice thing is with these, you can use the outside edge too. Um, but you know, it's got some squares. This one has rectangles. There's also a triangular one and a hexagon one. I don't use those as much. I don't like them as much as the circle, square, and rectangle one. So, but yeah, so I do use templates sometimes, but not always. And I find that lately I haven't been using them so much, more just because I'm trying to like loosen up. I find that I get real tight with my art, especially when I work this small. You'll probably see me get kind of tight with especially near the end as I'm kind of finishing it up and embellishing it. But yeah, so I've got this. I'm gonna go ahead and glue that on. So I'll use my glue paper here. So one thing you may have noticed is that this paper does curl. It is the Strathmore 400 series mixed media paper. And I showed this yesterday on the intro, but I'll pull it up in case you didn't watch it. And it's a 180 pound paper, 300 grams per square meter, which a lot of people will say, you look at the grams per square meter because that's a little bit more accurate. So 300 grams per square meter or meter squared is a pretty thick paper. But especially when you're using the air dryer, it tends to really curl. I find that it flattens out over time, and a lot of times I'll package these up in clear plastic sleeves with a backer board to sell them, and they'll flatten up. So some people will flatten them using, you know, weights and such, and I never really do that, but there's always things that you can kind of use to help flatten it. So I kind of like just looking at the composition. Being an art teacher for 20 some years, and teaching students about composition, I'm always thinking about that. It's always kind of on my mind. So like these two squares balance out my face, and that's a reason why I turned it this way. And this will become a great place to maybe draw something or put something there. So yeah, I'm not really sure exactly what will come of that, but okay. All right, so I'm kind of at this point where I'm like, all right, what do I do next? Not really sure. I think I know at some point I want to come back around these lines and really kind of help straighten them up and use some other material maybe besides the water-soluble pencil. I'm thinking maps. I love maps, but there's something about this image that I'm thinking it's got to have a map or parts of a map. So I love used book sales. At least several years ago, you could go in and you could find little things of maps all over the place. Nowadays, because we have maps on our phones, paper maps are a little bit harder to come by. You can always buy them new from bookstores and such, but there's something I love. I just love maps. I mean, the security envelope really kind of reminds me of a map. I kind of like this. I'm wondering if I can if I cut out squares and put them in there, or if I want to leave those open. Maybe I'll do one. Let me try it. That's the nice thing about kind of a mixed media approach, is that I can at least see what it looks like before I decide to glue something down. And if I were to paint, I can always come back and paint over it or glue something over it. Well, I like how that kind of brings something solid, because what's underneath is a little kind of, I mean, it reads as a square, but I don't know. I'm wondering if it kind of gets lost. So I think I am going to glue that on. I like in this image of a map, there's a little roundabout, a little circle. I like that. Okay. Now the question is, do I want something else down there? So let's see. I think that's about the size I want. All right, so Kathy was asking about the red pen. Yeah, so the red pen, or wherever I put it, there it is. It's a Faber Castell Pitt artist pen, and they have only certain colors that have these like really fine, extra fine points. They label it as an S. You probably can't see that, but it's labeled as an S, so I think it means like super fine. So it's a real small, fine tip. They have all their other colors in brush tips, but I find that the brush tip is a little thick. So I like the fine or the super fine tips. Now, some colors like black and some others they have in multiple sizes, and so you can get a whole set of black ones with all these different sizes of tips, and just is a real versatile pen. The nice thing is that it's India ink, and it's light fast, and it's waterproof. And the other thing is that they're much safer on airplanes. I used to use the Uniball Vision pens. I still do, but I've had issues of them kind of not exploding on airplanes, but kind of getting big globs of ink that come out because of the change in pressure. So I've ruined many a pen on an airplane ride. But I guess with the pandemic, I don't really have to worry too much about that now. So Julie was asking about the pencil. I'm not sure if you're talking about the regular pencil that I was using or the purple. The purple is technically it's not a watercolor pencil. I will call them watercolor pencils. It's a Derwent Inktense pencil, and the Inktense pencils are water-soluble ink, and it's just a lot. It's a mouthful. My water-soluble ink pencil just doesn't roll off the tongue. But watercolor pencil does. So I will often call my Inktense watercolor pencils. But they work just like watercolor pencils. They're water soluble, they blend with water, there's different techniques you can use. And the only thing is that Derwent claims that they're more permanent. So that once you spread water over them and they dry, that they're not going to lift off. I think that's a little bit debatable. I think it's how much you put down and does it all get spread around. So yeah, but it does seem to kind of not lift up as easily as regular watercolor pencil. Okay. Somehow I feel it's kind of fitting that my first one uses a selfie, uses a self-portrait. Yeah, so just kind of my first attempt at this. I'm thinking I want to come back. Now I'm going to use, this is another Faber Castell pen. It's the black. So I have it in, these are all the super fine colors that I have. So I've got a pink and a blue, a cobalt green. This is orange glaze, as they call it. This one's magenta. So I've got a whole series of colors, and I have some of the brush pens too, but I'm going to use the black. And I think what I want to do is to put, I want to make this a little more of a hard edge. I want to be careful. I just glued those maps down, and if some of the glue oozed out, if it gets on the tip of the pen, it could cause some problems. I think I'm okay. And I don't know if you noticed, but I turned the paper. I always find it interesting to see some artists work, and they're trying to like do stuff, and they're in an awkward position as they're drawing or painting, and it's like, you can turn the paper. Even like a canvas, even if you're painting on a canvas, you can always turn the canvas, even if it's on an easel. And actually turning it allows you to see it from different perspectives. So the black pen is kind of blending in a little bit with the purple, but that's okay, because I might dig out my colored pencils here as well to kind of finish it up. So I'm already talking about finishing, but I mean, it's already technically, I don't want to be here on here any longer than 5 o'clock. That's one limitation that I've sort of set for myself, is that, all right, I'm going to do this and spend an hour. Part of that is that I just have other stuff I need to do. Nothing on the schedule today other than trying to fix my water heater, but I think having some kind of limitations helps. And I think a lot of artists have a hard time doing that. So if you saw my intro yesterday, I talked a little bit more about that. But I think too often artists will sit down and they're like, oh, I want to make something, and then they freeze. And part of that is because they don't give themselves a limitation. So like when I started this out, my limitation was, I'm just going to start with some random color, and I picked blue. And then as I was working, I thought, hey, I'll do some purple. That'll go with that. And so kind of one decision leads to another, and one decision informs future decisions. But kind of giving yourself limitations, I think, is what making art's about, what creativity is about. So I'm just putting in some little stripes and patterns. think I want to pull out some colored pencils. Let me pull those out. So I just have some Derwent. I use a lot of Derwent. I use a lot of Faber Castell. Use a lot of Strathmore. So there are certain brands that I know that are good quality. But the nice thing is that really it's like, even if you just use Crayola, some people get real caught up like, oh, I have to have the best materials. But you'd be surprised what you could even do with just Crayola stuff. These are Derwent Color Soft pencils. They're a nice soft colored pencil, and I think they're wax based. They do, Derwent and other companies do have like oil based light fast ones, but that's not what I'm using today. And all I'm doing is I'm shading a little bit around those squares, and you might not even be able to really tell if anything's changing. I mean, I can kind of see it on my end, but with how small it is in the video and the quality of the video, you might not be able to really see. Maybe you can. You can see how it's a little shiny around there, so the colored pencil kind of makes it shinier, but you can see maybe that it's a little bit more of a shadow around it. And I'm using indigo. Indigo is a dark blue, and I find that's a good color to kind of use first in any kind of shadow. So whether I'm shading skin or I'm using brown, if I use the blue first, then other colors will mix into it. So blue, instead of just doing black, a lot of people will grab black. Oh, I'm doing a shadow, it's black. And it's like, well, really, is it? And then I can use the purple, the violet on top of it. And so I'm really kind of getting into the end stages of this piece. And so I'm really looking more for embellishments, more ways of trying to finish it up, trying to wrap it up. And so the additions at this point tend to be a little bit more subtle. I think it only makes sense for this part back here to be more in shadow. So I'm just kind of taking a little bit of time to to look at it to see if I'm done. It's starting to feel pretty finished. One of the things that I've decided, one of my other limitations, I don't think I mentioned this yesterday, but I did mention it in my newsletter that I sent out yesterday morning, was that I wasn't really going to use words. I might use, the maps have words on them, but I wasn't going to do like big words as part of the composition. So I'm really trying to just force myself to work with images and color and not rely on the words to tell the viewer the meaning. So I'm not going to put any words on there, but I keep thinking like it needs something else. And I think I'm going to pull out, this is a Uniball Signo white gel pen, and it's probably one of the favorite white pens of a lot of mixed media artists. It's a very opaque gel pen, at least for the most part. So yeah, I think I'm going to use that, but I think I'm going to go back to my box of templates. There's one template in here that I think it's in here that I might want to use. This isn't the one I was looking for, but I think it'll do. I was looking for a circle, and I've got one that has a bunch of circles in it that are, and it's a hard plastic. It's actually something I found, but I think this will do. I think I can use the circle here. So you can maybe see how that white really shows up on top of those other materials. I think it does take that gel pen a little bit of time to dry, so that's why I'm kind of putting it at the edge of the template as I trace the next one. But then that also means that it's going to go over top of that picture of me a little bit. And so it just barely goes over the shoulder. But that does a lot to push this down into the image. Makes it feel a little bit more part of it. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call this done. I mean, I have about 5 minutes left or so. Just the last thing to do is to sign it, so I'm just going to use my black Faber Castell pen. I think I'm just going to sign it right there. Okay, well, that's it. I think that's pretty cool for my first one. I'm kind of surprised that I really like it. Yeah, I think I know myself. I know that a lot of times I'll have like 5 or 6 or 10 different papers going on at one time, especially when I'm working on something this small. Because usually what I find is that I'll be working on them. I'll have like 10 of them going, and I'll get started. Then I'll pull out like 3 or 4 that really kind of feel like they're working, and then I'll have others that I'm just like, I'll just put those aside. I'm not going to do anything with them. And then as I work and work, if I get 1 or 2 out of the original 10 that I feel like really work, then that's pretty good. So my goal isn't to sit down and every day make a masterpiece. My goal is to sit down and just to make. And if something comes up that I'm like, oh, I really like that, that's great. That's an added bonus. But that's not the point of this. The point of this art challenge is to challenge me to make art every day for an hour. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to make some of your own work. And I'm just trying to see if there are other comments. Let me make sure. Alright, so I'm not seeing anything else written there, but who knows, maybe it's sometimes I don't always see exactly what I need to see. But again, if you have any questions or any other comments, go ahead and pop them into the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer them in a little bit. Looks like somebody. All right, so yeah, so I hope that you were able to kind of join me for this last hour. And again, I'm going to be coming here every day, every weekday at least, at 4 p.m. I know it's a weird time. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me for my very first day. I look forward to coming back tomorrow, same time. Hey, help me spread the word. Let people know that I'm doing this. And maybe we get some more people to join in the fun. And if there's if there's ever a day where you're just like, oh, I can't make 4 o'clock, I'm saving these in Facebook so that people can access them anytime. And I'll probably also upload a video to my YouTube channel. So like I said, if you got any questions, any comments, go ahead and pop them into the comments, and I will catch you all tomorrow then. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all being here with me.